Like in other MMOs, raiding is one of the biggest draws to the endgame in Final Fantasy XIV. And also like other MMOs, a popular way to take on this content is with a set group that has a specific date and time every week to raid. This is called a static for obvious reasons. So when I finally reached the endgame in FF14, I was itching to get into raiding and join a static. And it was the perfect time to do so, as the final tier of the Eden raids, called Eden's Promise, was about to come out. It fell upon me to organize and run a static, though luckily I had the guidance of veteran raiders to help me at points. Within a few weeks we were up and running, but as quickly as it began, it ended. This is the story of the new Raid Brigade, or the NRB for short, the mistakes made along the way, and how its short life met its end in a measly 2 weeks. Of course, the most logical place to begin the story is at the very beginning, so let me set the stage. It was a week or two before the launch of patch 5.4. By this point, my FC leader had been nice enough to start introducing myself and other Shadowbringers babies to the endgame content in Final Fantasy XIV. We did multiple lockouts of learning parties for Sea to Sacrifice Extreme, and we even cleared Shiva Unreal on the very last day. So, with this experience under my belt and a newfound thirst for the challenge Savage content looked to provide, I set out looking for a static. I don't think I could possibly be in a better FC than the one I am currently in. It's a group of 80 or so players, yet we always have 20 people online at all times, and the fact that most are good endgame players means I rarely have to resort to using Party Finder. My FC also wanted to start running more statics and had a static sign-up sheet where you would put down your character's name, raid availability, and skill level. Of course, I had never done raiding before, so I put myself down as a new raider and waited to see if I would be asked to join a static by someone who was organizing one. Well, funny thing is that everyone was listed as mid-core or hardcore raiders and weren't going to lug around dead weight by taking a new raider, especially if they're a tank like myself. So, after a week or two of waiting with no results, I went, screw it. I'll just organize my own group of new raiders. So I did. I gathered up all the new raiders that were listed on the static sign-up sheet, and then started finding the Shadowbringers babies or just new raiders that were in the FC or that were joining. Sure enough, after about a week, I had managed to gather 8 people that were new or new/mid-core that were willing to run with us. So we created a few channels within the FC Discord, and I was then asked by the FC leader what the raid team's name was. I came up with something pretty much on the spot and answered, call it the new Raid Brigade, or NRB for short, I guess. Now, as cheesy as this name is, it fit the group in terms of skill level, and it flows quite well. Once the Discord channels were created, it fell upon me as the leader of the group to lay out rules and expectations, and also inform everyone of the planned times. So after telling them the times, which aren't really important to the story, I gave what I thought were reasonable and understandable expectations. That announcement read as follows. At NRB, with the first raid day coming up, we need to set some expectations and decide some things. Expectations. 1. While static raid day is Friday, weekly reset is Tuesday. You must not clear an Eden Promise Savage raid floor before the static raid day. This makes sure that the maximum amount of loot is dropped. 2. If you cannot make the raid, you will inform me at least 24 hours in advance. That way we can try and find a substitute for the night. 3. If you wish to leave the static, you should inform me at least 24 hours before the next raid time. 4. However we decide to handle loot, do not complain. Throughout the tier, as we advance, everyone will get their gear eventually. I then proceeded to link a straw poll to decide on how loot would be dealt with, and everyone chose to do priority looting. DPS first, tank second, healer third. By this point, the ninja in our group had pretty much stepped up as second in command of the static, because I really did need help, and they organized a spreadsheet with everyone's best in slot items on it. All that was left was to actually start raiding. By this point, I was pretty confident in the group, as everyone was chatting in the channels and nothing was going amiss. Once the first raid day came, everything was still going great, despite our machinist being an hour late, of course. Our FC had been running some E9S learning parties the week prior, and 3 or 4 of us had seen up to Enrage in the fight before our first static raid day. And I had studied the calls to make sure I could call things correctly as the leader of the group, though that didn't stop me from being nervous as shit to do the calls on the first day, hence why I didn't stream the first night. The first raid day went great, actually. Despite some people being completely fresh to E9S, we managed to make our way up to tiles consistently, and I think everyone had a good time. In between pulls, everyone had been laughing and making jokes, and we were progressing at a good pace. We only did 3 hours the first week, and everything had gone great. Yet, in between the end of the first day and the next raid day, things had started to go awry, though I had no clue at the time. The second raid day came and went, and though I don't remember us ever getting past towers, we were getting there pretty clean on almost every pull. I left the call that night pretty satisfied with where we had gotten to and just put it off as a slow progression day. But we were set to raid the next day as well, so I was convinced that we would clear that day. Yet, as luck would have it, the night we had just finished would be the last time the group actually raided together, and overnight everything would start to fall apart. Hey, I hope you're enjoying the video. If you are, please make sure to like it and subscribe to the channel. It really does help out a lot. And if you want more videos like this in the future, tell me that in the comments, because I'm happy to make more. I can already tell this generic inserted clip has worn out its welcome, so let's return to the video. The next morning, I woke up to find that our Dark Knight had completely disappeared. And by disappeared, I mean he actually went poof into thin air. He had left the FC Discord, removing anyone on his friends list that was in the static. He left the Balance Discord as well, so we no longer shared a server with him. And then the icing on the cake was that we couldn't even reach him in-game because he moved his character to a whole other data center overnight. So I started to panic, wondering why he left and trying to reach him any way I could think of, but to no avail. A few hours later, I found out that he had actually been speaking to our ninja about leaving, and she thought that they had come to an agreement to finish out the week and see how he felt. Why they didn't think to tell me, the guy organizing everything, is beyond me, and I'm honestly still kind of pissed about it. I then ended up talking to our FC leader, who had also spoken to the Dark Knight about him leaving the static, once again, not thinking of telling me, and apparently, the Dark Knight was worried that people would think less of him if he had left the static. Let me say this, just in case he ever sees this video. If he had told me that he wanted to leave the static, I would have been fine with it and I would have thought no less of him and everything would have just gone on as normal. After all, I was prepared for people who wanted to leave for whatever reason. But simply disappearing without a word to myself and the majority of the group was stupid. And now I definitely think less of him for it. But that isn't the only thing that went wrong in between the raid days, because a bunch of people bailed last minute. I already knew our astrologian, who is a great guy who I still play with, was going to be absent that day. But then our samurai and machinist backed out as well for the day, so now we needed 4 substitutes for the night. But hey, it was no big deal as I thought people would still be good to raid the following week. With that many people absent, I would normally just cancel raiding that day, but people really wanted to clear, myself included, and we felt confident that we could. We gave up on 2 chesting the fight and grabbed 4 people from our FC who already knew the fight and had cleared before. Within half an hour we had cleared E9S and our ninja got her necklace best in slot. We moved on to progging E10S for the rest of the night and managed to get all the way to the first void gate, so roughly the halfway mark. Fresh off clearing E9S, I was feeling confident and looking forward to clearing with the rest of the group the following week. But that never came to pass. A few days later, our summoner pulled the same disappearing act, leaving the FC Discord and FC in-game. I managed to message him, but never got a reply, and after that, just gave up on him. This was like the second time he had randomly quit the FC at this point without a word, and trying to track down someone like that to get them back honestly wasn't worth the effort. A day or so later, our samurai did the same thing, leaving the FC Discord and the FC in-game. But I knew that something must be amiss for him to leave, and after talking with him in DMs, he was more than happy to come back to the FC after we cleared up a few misunderstandings about the FC as a whole, though he didn't return to raiding, sadly, which sucks because he was doing pretty damn well. So by this point, the new Raid Brigade had been victim to 3 disappearing acts, and morale was low. I wanted to rebuild the static, but seeing that the NRB was looking as if it was going the way of the dinosaurs, I gave everyone the option to leave the static before undergoing a rebuild. And in that process, we lost our white mage and ninja, though both parted with an unnecessary apology to me and are still around in the FC. With 3 people left, I decided to kill the static. There were simply too many people to replace, and I didn't want to be taking up people's time or headspace when there really was nothing going on. After the NRB was finally put out of its misery, I took a while and talked with some other people to figure out what I did wrong. and I managed to come up with a few things that I did do wrong. Number 1. While I set expectations for loot, I never set expectations for how fast we would be progressing through the fight. Instead, I assumed that since it was a group of new raiders, people were going to be okay and expect to be taking it at a slower pace than most statics would, as many would be just getting into raiding and would have a harder time recognizing and memorizing mechanics. While I don't know how big of a mistake this was in the grand scheme of things, given we only really had 2 days of raiding, it is something that I know I need to set going forward. Number 2. I let anyone who wanted to join into the static. I was not selective with the people as long as they fit the role that we needed them to fill, and this was a big mistake. If I had taken more time and vetted the people who wanted to join and their level of commitment, the static might still be up and running. While personalities need to work together, of course, since I was dealing for the most part with people who were new to raiding, it should really have crossed my mind that some people may not actually like it. And I should have made sure they enjoyed things like raiding or were at least willing to commit to continuing on for a month or so. Number 3. I thought as leader of the static, I needed to organize and get everyone set up and into the call each night. Well, at first people were chatting outside of the raid in an attempt to get to know each other. I made it so they only really need to speak to me and not to the others. While this also put a lot more stress on me as I tried to make it so everyone was happy and that things were going well, I think it also made people feel more disconnected from the rest of the group. Number 4. The final one has more to do with actually being inside the raid, and that is the fact that the calls I was giving were quick explanations on how the mechanics worked and made it so that people simply followed my command instead of actually learning the mechanic. I think that this slowed down how fast we were progressing and helped lead to the demise of the static and the reason we never made it past towers. There are probably more, but this is all I can think of. So, that is the story of how my first static, the new Raid Brigade, died. It was short-lived, but pretty eventful and stressful for me. Trying to get everyone organized, trying to replace people, and also trying my best not to screw up calls. It was the first static that I ever joined, and also the first static I ever led, and I managed to learn a lot from it. Not to mention I've already put together a static with the old NRB guys who didn't leave, so I won't be out of raiding for long. Those raids will most likely be streamed on my Twitch, so go follow me there if you want to see what comes of it. But that's all for this video. If you enjoyed it, please hit the like button and subscribe, as that is what appeases YouTube and its algorithm and gets my videos suggested to more people. But as always, my name's Lokidum, and thank you for watching.